Welcome to the Shared Practices Podcast, Season 6. This is I love these interviews. George, how's it going?
Good. I found out about 1 minute ago what we're talking about today, and now I'm very excited. I saw this on my schedule, and I knew that we were recording for Season 6, and I didn't know what we were going to talk about. And now that I know the subject for today's episode, I am pumped.
Yeah, this has been a minute in the making. We had an episode last fall about my decision, or maybe it was early this year. I can't even remember.
I think we
About my
recorded in fall, but we released when things went through at the beginning of the year.
Yeah. I walked away from a partnership with some great people, some great practices that I was very grateful for, but ultimately just different visions and different direction, and realized also that like I kind of need to be in control, and I need to be able to buy things and break things, and spend money on the stuff that I want to spend money on, and grow a practice and add operatories and do all the crazy stuff that makes practices temporarily not profitable and but have long-term potential. So walked away, and my partners were very gracious about that in making that opportunity available. And as of January 1st, my practice divorce, quote unquote, was finalized, and I was a free man. So in the meantime, started looking at doing a startup, which felt very unshared practices of me. Have you talked about your stuff on air at all?
Not at all.
Are we going to today, or do you want to
No.
just okay? So I was looking at doing a startup, and I had gone. I did what we recommend, which was think about a startup, and at the same time think about an acquisition and look at practices.
Oh, I like where this is going.
And so I made sure I was doing both of those. I was looking at real estate. I was discussing models and ideas. And I went and looked at some practices. I reached out to a local broker. I was going to start putting together lists and sending out mailers. And I told the broker what I was looking for. It's Thad Miller from DDS Match. She's got the website that has practice listings and matches associates and people looking for jobs. Really, really enjoyed working with Thad. So he took me to a practice, and I looked at the practice, and it was exactly what I had asked for. It was like a larger practice, very healthy base, profitable, room to expand. There was real estate next door. It wasn't a 2-doctor practice, but it was like almost there, and we could add the real estate and turn it into a 2+ doctor practice. And as I went there and looked at it and thought about it, I was not excited at all. Like, this was like, okay, I'm not buying a 2-doctor practice. I'm buying a healthy single doctor practice with the potential to grow this very, very quickly and pretty easily. And just the thought of taking over a GP office didn't excite me at all. And it was this weird sensation of like, oh crap, like I thought that this is what I wanted, and he showed me exactly what I wanted, and I'm not excited about it. So that was a weird moment for me. And that pushed me towards, okay, you know what? I originally, with these 3 practices here in Indianapolis, I was thinking I'll do the specialty work between them. I was doing the endo, the surgery, and the plan was to do more implants if and when we got a CBCT. But I realized I didn't have a full schedule of any of those things, and I wasn't becoming an endodontist speed and quality root canal. I could do a great root canal, but it might take me hour and a half, 2 hours plus, depending on how MB2 behaves and all of that. I had a microscope, I had all the equipment. I realized if I didn't become an endodontist, there was no way endo was ever going to be predictable fast enough with the right team around me, the right equipment, the scheduling and all of that. So I was like, I kind of need to commit. And had a good friend who had recently done a denture and implant startup.
I think we got to talk about it. I don't think there's any way that I can do this episode without talking about it.
I kind of knew that this was going to have to come out at some point.
Yeah,
I mean, your doors are publicly open at this point.
Yeah, and I'm on the website and stuff. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Let's have the full conversation.
Let's talk about it.
Okay,
man.
so then we got to start with me then.
Okay, you go first.
So I was reached out to Austin for something totally. Austin Davis opened up Memphis Dentures and Implants at the beginning of 2020, January 2020. And sorry, Austin, if we didn't tell you we're going to talk about this publicly, but we are.
I'll message him right now
Yeah.
during this conversation.
So I'm on the phone with Austin.
And which he documented and has talked about on
he's talked
Dentaltown
about it. Yeah, he's talked about
other
other places. So I told him, I said, hey, we are. So I was talking to him and he goes, hey man, I've been thinking about it. You've been talking about moving your practice, which is something that I've talked about publicly, as I'm in the process right now of trying to move my office. And he goes, I think you should try my model in the space that you're leaving. And I was like, what do you mean your model? And then he goes, well, we have the dentures and implants thing. And he sort of explained it. And he talked about his revenue and his growth and everything.
Right.
And I booked a flight to Memphis on that phone call. So I was talking to him about something related to startups. And in that process, I booked a flight to Memphis to go check out his practice. And 2 weeks later, I was in Memphis. And it was a day trip. It was a 24-hour trip. I flew across the country and back in a 24-hour period. And I saw his practice. And I said, yeah, I've got to do this.
Well, I mean, you literally had all of the parts and pieces. You're leaving. The thought was, we're leaving an office that's going to have a cone beam, chairs, like got enough room to like leave that office. This question of like what to do with that old office. This was just such a no-brainer. Like that he had that conversation. You went and saw it, and it was like, why not? Like at this point, it was almost a no-cost startup for you to try this out of that space.
So then that's where the conversation started. And then the process of my building was taking a long time. And so I was like, okay, well, I can't wait that long to try this because I'm George and I'm very impatient.
Right.
And so about a month ago, we opened up.
Yes, February 15th.
Yeah, February 15th. Yeah, we recorded, or we opened up a practice. That is,
George did a startup.
I did a startup.
The scenes.
Yeah, I did a behind the scenes startup that opened. So from the time that I had the conversation with Austin to the time where we opened doors was 4 months.
Yeah.
And we are opening up other locations. So how many and where they are still to be determined. But we're creating a group in Phoenix called Valley Dentures and Implants, where we're going to try to perfect this model. I think that my impression, and Austin probably would not mind me saying this on air, my impression when I walked into Austin's office is like, yeah, you guys are killing it, but you're also like extremely inefficient. And there's a lot of opportunity here. There's a lot of opportunity for this to be refined. I'll put it that way. And so I'm excited for that challenge.
That challenge is so much fun. So
yes, thank you. Yes. I love that challenge.
Because it's like we've figured out so many things about a normal GP office.
Yeah.
And that is like, okay, we've kind of solved that problem for ourselves and for our clients and hopefully for our listeners in a lot of cases. And so to have a new model that we have way less data on, that there's opportunity in, there's challenges, it's different, is like this fun problem solving challenge.
Yeah. So it was going to be, I made the decision that I was going to play in the multi-practice world, and GP offices was kind of like, the thing I was going to do. And it's so much debt to get, and the lending situation, I wasn't able to get enough lending. And then like, kind of like you said, it just, I know it too well. It's too easy. I mean, sorry, it just is. Like we have, the number of coaching clients we have and the way that we are able to grow practice in our coaching department, like it wasn't challenging. And so this is a challenge. This is a very big challenge. And something we talk about a lot. So Matt, did you listen to Matt Ford's episode?
No, I haven't yet.
So one thing we talk about is the decision to go into multi-practice. And we talk about it from the perspective of don't do it for money. Do it for something else. And for me, the challenge has always been the most motivating thing. And this model presents so many challenges, and the timeline of opening up as many locations as we're doing in as short of a time as we are, we're looking at 5 or 6 in the next 5 months.
I still
5 to 6 months.
Our listeners often like can't keep up with the pivots. I can't keep up with the pivots. Like I was quoting the number to someone the other day and the timeline, and then George corrected me. He's like, no, actually there's another one in there potentially.
Right. It's moving so fast, and I like that speed. So that's what we're doing on my end. I'm not talking about it a whole lot, but
Well, and I will say,
because we're
and
still
maybe
trying to figure out the model. We're trying to
we're,
perfect it,
we're
right?
trying
When
to
we
perfect it. I also think there is a sense in general dentistry with the GP office that you're kind of competing with your very local like
yes.
market, like a
Oh
5
yeah,
mile
I'm happy you're
radius,
having this
10-mile
conversation.
radius.
Mhm.
And so like us sharing all of these like things on air about a GP office doesn't directly affect our offices. But I've got a friend who is a specialist. I'm not going to name on air, who has a great situation right now. And he's said like, please never talk about my situation on air because I don't want people knowing my market is this great for this type of specialty. Because I don't want a bunch of competition in that market of other specialists of the specialty. So once you move to this type of specialized model, it's your radius for competition and the realities of those competition um, increases. Um, and so I think that you and I, while we're going to talk about this today, this is not like a model that we're going to be like
We're not
packaging up
teaching this model. Yeah.
and teaching on air and to people in general of like this is how if you want to do a denture and implant practice, here's all the steps A, B, C, D.
Yeah, because I think we want to own these, right? So
Yeah, this is
like
we want to do this, not teach this.
yeah, exactly. So that's the thing is like if I taught someone in Phoenix how to do this, then I'm shooting myself in the foot.
Right.
Versus I'll figure it out and I'll take the risk and do that, and then I'll reap the rewards. Right. And that's so Richard and I are both. So anyway, now I think we've laid enough context where we can now. So I'm in the middle of this, right? From October until now, I've been knees deep in the world of dentures and implants and figuring out this model and like learning a lot about it. And I've been having a ton of fun. And opening up as many offices as we are in a short of a time frame. The whole challenge has been awesome. Love it. I'm having so much fun. So now Richard is watching all of this and deciding between his like, do I do a GP startup? Do I do a GP acquisition? And he's like, but wait, I just want to do implants all day. So now I'll let you pick up from where we left off.
Well, yeah. So I went and looked at that acquisition and realized like a large, multi-doc office that's a GP practice just didn't feel appealing to me and it didn't excite me in the way that I hoped it would. And so I was like, okay, maybe we'll do this denture and implant startup. The thing I will say is that I definitely got a little scared about it. Like I came at this from a little bit more of scarcity than you. And so I was like, okay, maybe I'll do like a hybrid denture and implant and cosmetic, full mouth rehab type practice because you're tracking the train wrecks and then you can serve all the train wrecks, patients who need a ton of care into one place. I will say that as I was doing the startup process and looking at startup spaces, I did find an office that was a previous dentist who's actually the most well-rated dentist in Indianapolis. Had moved because he's grown. He's, the most well-rated dentist, just kind of like your old office. It's like if you had vacated your old office and not done anything with it, that was available and made an offer on that space and the adjacent space next to it. And together, what's that?
To expand it?
To expand it, because it was at 7 operatories with no lab and no break room. So add another 4 or 5 operatories, add a legit full lab, add a break room and some other admin space, and have a over 4,000 square foot built out practice and pay almost nothing for the build out itself. I'd have to pay to equip it, but the build out would have gotten covered by the TI dollars from both of those spaces. So I had like a really, really exciting startup opportunity to build like a big, nice practice that I was proud of long-term and all of that. And that was kind of the direction I was going. When I continued to look at practices and as I was looking for an acquisition with the broker, I told the broker what I was doing. I was like, hey, ultimately this is, if I don't move forward with a practice on an acquisition, I'm looking at this kind of startup, denture and implant startup. And so he said, talk to me. It was during a showing. He's like, talk to me after this listing. Give me a call. And so he says, have you heard of a dentist named Dr. Ryan McCall? And I just start laughing. Like 2 minutes, I start laughing.
Oh my gosh.
Like if you're coming from the dental town world, who has not heard of Dr. Ryan McCall?
So we need to a lot of our listeners they haven't spent a lot of time in dental town.
Yeah.
And so dental town pre-shared practices was in my place the best place to get information.
It was pre-shared practices, pre-Facebook groups. It was like the only place online to find valuable, realistic stories. And sure, there was a lot of like people giving bad advice, and you had to kind of sort through that and weight that. But like authentic dentists who are making big moves and doing things differently than other people were sharing all of the details of how they did that. It was kind of a magical space at that point in time because there was nowhere else to go for this kind of information.
And I'm going to talk about Ryan McCall because I don't know anything intimate about him. So I think it's easier for me to share to our audience of everything that I've heard on Dentaltown.
Sure.
So that like, as you get this call, you can see sort of the context. Is he was a dentist that really figured out marketing on social media, got a ton of denture patients, and kept his model very simple, low cost dentures, and did not do a whole lot of implants, kept it very simple, and was just high volume, low cost dentures, and attracted people over the internet. That's sort of
in-house lab. That was the other.
In-house lab. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And built up a chain of practices. So 2 practices here in Indianapolis from scratch. You know, he originally, his username on Dentaltown is 2 chairs.
Oh yeah.
Because he bought a practice that was an immediate denture practice that operated out of 2 chairs, and that was it. And so, you know, very low overhead, you know, great service that you're doing for patients, and very niche down. And so he said, hey, these practices are for sale, and they're not publicly for sale because we can't list these without it becoming obvious exactly whose practice it was. The person, you know, Ryan wanted some anonymity with the practice sale before it closed, because obviously if the team finds out, if other people find out, there's problems. So he had a problem where he couldn't publicly list these practices for sale. So Dad shows me the practices. I get to meet Ryan, and I'm just like, holy cow, this is perfect. Like, this is ideal, because it's patients who are literally begging for implants. And Ryan has had, you know, various people who, you know, they've tried to get implants up and running, and they just run into challenges, didn't have a cone beam, you know, didn't have some of the parts and pieces needed to make that happen. But knew that was kind of the adjacent possible with his practice. But hadn't been able to just pull that off quite yet. So very excited that all of a sudden we can add cone beams at both locations. We can add implants and have patients who are just asking for it every day, like not even having to market at all for this. And you get enough edentulous people in, and some segment of them are going to go for more advanced treatment. And I was overjoyed, just blown away, super excited. And made an offer as soon as I could.
And due to the public nature of Ryan, we can't go into the typical details that we typically would discuss around collections and purchase price and all those things. So, because that's not respectful to him in his career. So, you know, I just want to kind of lay that foundation of, you know, want to make sure the discussion doesn't go there, because that's the next natural conversation with an acquisition is the size of the offices and all that stuff.
Which is hilarious, because it's like, I felt like the same thing on my last practices. The seller knew that I had a podcast, wanted to be very private about the purchase price, about you know, the collections, the profitability. Same thing with my partners, and there was issues with me talking about things on the podcast that then affect the operations of our practices. It's just ironic that this continues to be the trend of like the stuff that we talk about, this kind of stuff on the podcast all the time, but unfortunately, because our name is associated with it and people kind of know us.
Well, this is the whole reason why Underwater, we have Pre-Owner Underwater and Prax Underwater, because then we can talk about these things. But we are not underwater. So like, we need to keep that in mind.
Be careful.
Yeah. And I think you and I are pretty good. Oh, wait, we're better about that now because we've been doing it longer and been burned. So
we've been burned enough.
We've been burned enough to know when are the green areas and when are the red areas. Do not talk about these. So
you just gotta be careful. Yeah. So
update. You closed.
I closed last Wednesday.
You know what's funny is was that your closing date? When was your closing date?
It was the 1st of March, and we
ended closed on the 3rd.
Yeah.
So I forgot who I was talking to, but I was like, he's not closing on time, and and they were like, how do you know? I'm like, he never closes on time. Richard never closes on the closing date.
What do you mean, Richard? I feel like that's an acquisition problem, not a Richard problem. Give me a break. This time I was so mad. Like, real estate, there was a lot of back and forth on the real estate. The existing lease kind of was hanging us up for a minute. And we were able to get there with the landlord. But the landlord was great to work with. The thing that hung us up was the stupid business insurance. I was so mad. I used my lender's business insurance because they've got like
Okay.
Huntington Bank is who I use. I did one of these SBA loans that's coming with some of these like
COVID
fees,
perks.
all the perks that are out right now that are out, and then actually they take back. So they were saying, hey, it's going to be 6 months of principal and interest paid by the government with one of these new relief packages. And then as soon as we get to the closing table, they're like, hey, just kidding. It's actually only 3 months of principal and interest, because it was always subject to funding availability. So I'll get some amount of payments paid for and things like that. But I needed a loan that would cover more than just the purchase price. I needed a loan that would allow me to expand, get cone beams, and do some marketing.
So have you started the process of getting cone beams now?
Yep. So I pulled the trigger on our final quote yesterday from Patterson, and
You're going with Action?
Action's 2X mines.
Nice.
Yeah,
same. That's what we're using.
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's so I just want to say, so now I can finally say the thing I've been waiting to say for months,
Okay.
which is Richard Lowe, in his career in the military, purchased 5 practices. Can everyone give him a round of applause?
Which is not advisable. That's not the recommendation of this show.
The guy enters the military, starts a podcast that becomes a top-rated show in dentistry with over 1 million downloads, which then turns into a company, and then buys 5 practices, all while still in the military.
It's been a busy couple of years.
You only have a month left, so we need the full timestamp. Yeah, it's like 29 days.
29 days.
Yeah, I know the date too.
5 hours, 20 minutes, and 53 seconds.
So can everyone just take a minute? We're going to have a moment of round of applause for Captain Richard Lowe. I think we got to use the Army terminology here, right? Oh. Captain
Which
Richard
we've avoided because like conflict of interest, and there's so many things. Oh my goodness.
So how proud I am that my partner is the dentist that did that all while in the military is really cool. And so I think that that's just something I want to talk about. The other thing I'm not going to let you get away with not talking about is the shift between multi-practice, no multi-practice, to multi-practice again.
This is like the episode of The Office where he's like getting
snip snap.
That's what you and I are right now with multi-practice.
So I was snip snap with multi-practice too. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I like that terminology. So, the funny thing is, like, with Richard, right? I went to hang out with him in Indianapolis in October. Actually, like that was right before I went to Austin's office. I think I had the trip planned, but I hadn't gone yet. And
this which is the irony of it all.
Yeah. And so it was, I think my perception of it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is there was a lot of things you didn't like about the multi-practice situation you were in that you sort of projected on multi-practice as a whole.
And I think multi-practice as a whole has the tendency to not do a lot of things right. Like
totally.
There is a lot of ways that like certain stuff just doesn't scale well, and a lot of people have not figured this out, but they're still doing it.
I think it's the multi-practice culture of doing things not well because it makes money and it's good enough that we both just hate.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's the thing that's really hard to deal with.
Well, and I think the other thing that happens with multi-practice is that a lot of people have these golden handcuffs of you buy a profitable practice and add it to your group, and you don't want to change anything because then that affects the profitability, and then it affects your ability to buy more practices.
Yeah.
So you're like looking for practices that are great, full of good people that you don't have to mess with. But over time, it's impossible that all of these practices are going to always have good people. And
you have to change things. Yeah, you have to change things.
There's a lot of turnover and a lot of things that happen.
So
anyway.
that was Richard's situation. And so I was thrilled, absolutely over the moon, when this was an acquisition of 2 practices instead of 1. Because I knew that if he ended up in one office, he would never go again multi. But the fact that it was 2, then I think I was, and I told you that right away when I told you.
You got me.
Yeah, I was like, yes, this is great. Because I said number 3 is not far away now. because you
Yeah.
have two. But if he had one, he would have never gone to two.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're absolutely right. And that was the whole thing, was like, you know, because there are so many economies of scale of centralizing in a
Yeah.
large practice, including the leadership, including the you know, a smaller, tight knit. Well, not even a smaller. Like Alex Sharp's office and your office, where you've got team leads, you've
Yeah.
got a culture. That culture, that's really important to me. Like, I think
Yeah.
the culture of the offices that I'm in charge of, the experience of not only the doctors but the team members at those offices, and being able to influence that and lead that, is important to me. And I know that at a certain point, that becomes harder and harder to affect and directly. And so there's also a sense of like, I'm while number 3 may or may not be on the horizon, cough, Soren, cough, cough. There's for me, there's this like sense of, man, I don't want to scale infinitely. Like, I have zero like Heartland type ambitions of just like, let's just grow for the sake of growth. Like,
And
that sounds
there's a number in between 1 and 1,000 that's right for Richard Lowe.
and I was pretty sure it was 1, and then I just happened to buy 2, and now I'm like, okay, fine.
It's more than 1, but less than 1,000. So if anyone's
Yeah.
wondering how many practices Richard Lowe is going to end up with, I'll give you a hint: more than 1, less than 1,000.
Yeah.
So anyway, the reason I'm saying that is because I think I look at the situation as two completely different situations, because now you have operational control.
Yes.
And that's the big thing, is Richard and myself and most people hate being told what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a big difference between being told what to do and telling people what to do. And I can tell you from my experience, I much prefer telling people what to do as opposed to being told what to do. And so I think Richard is really going to enjoy this part of multi-practice ownership.
I will say, even within shared practices, like when Matt holds our
I do not like it.
I don't do well with it.
Yeah, I don't.
It's hard for me. I got
He's
mad
the only person at shared practices that can tell me what to do, and I do not like it.
Yeah. So, and I think that's important to know about people's personalities, and like,
I'm happy we share that in common.
I got so mad. I was so mad at him. I sent you both angry texts last month. I made sure you were in that text chain. I just needed to vent for a second, and then I was fine.
Yeah.
But like we had Skylar Morton on the podcast, and he identified that, you know, he's the one who did a startup and an acquisition straight out of school. He identified that very early in dental school. Like, I am not going to be able to work for anyone else. That's just my personality. And I think that's a great fit for practice ownership, is just you want to be able to make the decisions. You're okay with the fact that those decisions sometimes are going to suck to make. Like being in charge, and I've already had this. I've had like 2 people in the last month who I've made a decision that they were pretty upset with and questioned my character on. Both of them to my face said, "Well, I'm glad I found out this now rather than later, because it shows your true colors." Like, slap in the face. This is one was a bank and one I won't mention, but like,
one was a bank.
A bank. Yeah. This guy
bank said that.
Yeah.
Wow. Grow up.
He went to bat, and he like pulled a lot of strings to try and get my thing to the finish line and get me a good quote and everything like that. And it just was still taking too long, and I had to move forward with another bank.
Yeah.
And I told both banks from the start, I said, I am going to play you guys until the very end, because I can't afford to not have options until the very end. And so I was very upfront about that.
So
the whole time.
This is something I've been talking to Richard about, because Richard and I have a lot of people-pleasing qualities.
Yeah.
And we are, I think personality-wise, we share so many similarities. And the hardest part of entrepreneurship for me has been, the business is clearly telling you to do something. And being able to like actually hear what the business is saying is needed to be done, and doing it in spite of the fact that you're going to upset people is, in my view, one of the hardest parts of my job. And the upcoming episode of Dental Friends with Benefits that you'll listen to, Richard, soon, I talk about that a lot, about the psychological strain that that's been having on me, and judging my character and judging myself for the decisions I have to make on occasion. And
Yeah.
like people telling you that they question your character, I know like Richard has a lot of like, moral value. That's a hard thing to take as an entrepreneur. And, there are times that you have to do that type of thing. And so that's been a growing edge for both of us. And so I'm happy that you opened up about that a little bit on air, because I think it's a big point.
And I've been trying to do what you've said on Dental Friends with Benefits. Like, I feel awful at those moments. Like, it sucks leading up to it and it sucks doing it.
Mhm.
And then I just kind of sit there with that awful feeling of
Yep.
like, this
You
does
just
not
feel
feel good.
awful.
Yeah. I'm letting this person down in a major way and they're going to be mad at me. They might talk bad about me behind my back. They might
Yeah.
say things to people about me. So sucks.
But you work for your business.
And ultimately that's what it's been is I'm making the hard choices that are best to protect my business. And I think that was something I learned as well previously, is like letting a team member go. Sometimes
Yeah.
there are times where you work with someone for a long period of time. You give them the benefit of the doubt. You give them second chances. You give them training. But ultimately, everyone else starts like your team is your work family, and you want to like be their advocates. But at some point, some people are kind of betraying the family, and everyone else has to pick up the slack.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the decisions where you have to let someone go. That even though they're a good person, even though you really like them, you have to make those hard decisions because everyone else suffers the consequences if you don't make those hard decisions.
And I think that I'm like a lot of dentists in the fact that I get attached to the fact that I haven't had turnover of my key people. And so much so to the point where sometimes I should have a little bit of turnover with some of my key people. And I sort of reached this point where I was like, okay, I'm now willing to lose everyone. And I reached that point like back in September, like 6 months ago. And I was like, all right, everyone can go if it's not going to work. And just that mindset shift of like being willing to lose people and telling them like in tough situations, like, look, this is the way it is. And if you leave, that's okay. And tell them I'll be friends with you forever, but I don't have to employ you forever, has actually like alleviated a lot of conflict, because then they get to make that decision on their own, where they either choose the situation as it currently is or they go somewhere else. And then so far, everyone, I haven't lost any of my key people yet, but at some point that might happen, and that's okay, because maybe, if for me at least, like who was best for my business a long time ago isn't what's best for my business now. And right. It's just that tough decisions that you've got to make as an entrepreneur, and those tough relationships. And it's grueling when you care about people. This is grueling. It can be.
Caring about people, and then that key people thing. I mean, certain people can almost hold your business hostage, where
Yes.
it's like they feel like you are in, like they're indispensable. Like your business can't function without them. In this model, that could be like a lab tech, for instance.
Yeah.
I've inherited great lab techs and people I'm really excited to work with. But very much so, a dentist could feel like, or if another dentist is working for them. There's a lot of situations. An office manager. There's a lot of positions where someone can get that sense of like, I'm unfireable. I can do whatever the heck I want because they're screwed without me. And that's not a good space for anyone to be in.
So we got like 9 more minutes left, where Richard and I both have appointments at the top of the hour. So I want to, is there anything else that you wanted to make sure we discuss on this episode that we haven't yet touched on? Because I know we've kind of gone on a few tangents.
I would say that overall, I think this goes back to like the thing that we do at Shared Practices more ridiculously well than anyone else, which is pivoting.
I don't know if ridiculously well is the right term, but yeah.
Frequently.
Yeah.
We are proficient through volume
Yes.
Of pivots.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought I knew what I wanted, which was I want to be the traveling specialist between 3 offices. Realized that wasn't what I wanted. Walked away and am willing to try something else. Maybe in 5 years, I'll realize this isn't what I want long term. Maybe I'm just an ADD serial entrepreneur who will never be happy. But I right now, I feel really, really excited about what's to come. But I would encourage people to realize that getting to that moment where you're willing to walk away from anything to pursue the thing that you want is a good place to be in, even though sometimes it feels very painful and hopeless and scary.
I think it's that relentless pursuit of happiness in your career, where it's like that wasn't working for you. And a lot of people, the majority of people, would stay
Stick it out.
because, well, I have, like Richard walked away from a fair amount of money. Like it was like not a lot of people would have done that. And I was so proud of him in Indy when I was there with him and he made that decision. I'm like, I'm so proud of you for walking away from X dollars. Like that meant, and he prioritized what was his happiness first. And the other thing is he trusted himself. He trusted that he was going to figure it out. And he didn't know exactly the path. He didn't know exactly the way, but he trusted himself that he was going to figure out what was next. And it came. And it doesn't come until you're available, right? These opportunities don't fall into your lap until you're ready for them.
Totally.
It's like what luck meets opportunity. There's some quote about that stuff. Like, I don't know what it is.
Totally.
Yeah, but like that's
And,
what.
and thank you for your support through all of it. Like, there's been a lot of key conversations. I am very proud of the fact that Ashley on Dental Friends with Benefits talks about her once a month support call to George. I'm very proud that my support calls are like 5 minutes or less.
Yeah,
like,
they're quick.
They're efficient. We get through it. I understand. I'm like, okay, this is what I'm bringing to the table. I only elevate to George when I've got something that I'm like, okay, I need a George level conversation, and we get through it pretty quick.
Yeah, but it's monthly. It seems monthly with everybody. I don't know what it is, but like
Yeah.
just that frequency is just pretty consistent.
It is.
But it's just I want to go back and I want to really wrap up with, like let's reflect for a minute. Like we got a few minutes. Like you and I started. I think the cool thing about this show is our whole journeys are on air.
Yeah, for better or for worse.
Right? Like I'm coming up on in a month. I think it's 4 years for me.
Yeah.
And so 4 years ago, I was a D3 with a brand new kid.
With a brand new kid, join Shared Practices podcast as this
to help Richard out.
Thank you.
And like that was I was this kid to help Richard out. I was a D3 dental student. I was like an intern, and like Richard has purchased now on air 5 offices. I mean, I won't talk about my stuff, but like I've done a lot and it's all been public. And I think that's really cool. And I think the lesson that I would take if I'm a listener listening to that, we're not talking about Richard and George right now. We're talking about you. And it's like you're at some time of your life in some place in your life where you're like, well, I haven't done anything. It's like, yet.
Right.
And watch us. Go back and listen to us as D3, D4s. Or I was a D3, he was a resident. And like success is not an accident, it's a choice. And we both made the choice at that time that we were going to do whatever it took to get to where we're at. And, and we're still going to where we're going, right? Like we're not done. We're having fun. We're enjoying what we do. And therefore it doesn't feel like we're striving for anything. It doesn't feel miserable. We're loving every part of it because we pivot constantly into situations of happiness. We make decisions not based on what's going to make money, but what's going to make us happy. And if you're doing what you love, you'll make money, especially in dentistry. So, I think that's like, if I'm listening, I'm thinking, wow, these guys started with 0 practices. And, like Richard's bought 5 on air. I'm in the process of, creating additional locations. And so like the whole thing has been really cool. And if I'm a listener, I'm thinking I can do that too. And
very well said.
You can do that too. So don't do this this is what George and Richard could do. This is like, go back and listen to George and Richard, a long time ago, and they had nothing and we figured it out as we went. And that's the process. You just figure it out as you go. And so long as you're willing to be malleable and change and grow and listen to others and accept feedback and all of the things that it takes to grow, then you'll get to where you want to go. But I think the biggest piece is Richard and I have relentlessly pivoted into situations where we're happy. And those will constantly change. And I think at this point we've surrendered to the process. And I don't know what my life is going to look like 2 years from now, nor do I care. All I know is that I trust myself, that I'm going to put myself in a good situation because that's what historically I've continued to do over and over again. And so I think Richard, he doesn't know what the next 2 years is going to look like, how many locations, between 1 and 1,000. I don't know where the number is going to be, but all I know is that Richard is going to be happy because that's what he's shown in his whole career, that he's always pivoted towards happiness. And so he'll always continue to pivot towards happiness.
Dude, that mic drop, that was good.
Thanks, man. Yeah. Now this is, I think it's cool. We do this on air and it's really vulnerable to like talk about, like we've talked about a lot of failure on air.
Yeah.
Like, I want that to be known. Like Richard and I had an issue in a couple years ago. We came across some findings of pretty inauthentic people in our industry that are public. And there's more examples now as we've gotten, but there's a lot of inauthentic influencers in dentistry. They say they're doing one thing, and behind the scenes, they're not doing nearly as well as they say they are. And Richard and I made a pact to each other, and we said, always authentic, no matter what. And we have done that to a fault. And that's the thing I'm so proud of. Is like there's the only things we can't talk about on air are the things that like either are too good to share or it's shooting ourselves in the foot like we talked about. But we've talked about every failure we've had pretty much publicly. Like I don't leave major failures behind the scenes. Like I put them out there as much as I can without impacting other people. And I think that's one thing that I'm really proud of us for doing, and proud of you too. Like getting on air and saying, "Hey, I bought 3 practices. It didn't work. I don't know what's next." And like Matt, right, gets on air and says like, "Hey, I stepped aside of my practice and like it's been tough. Like these things aren't going well, but it was just what I wanted from my lifestyle." Like we've all done that. We've really led with that authenticity first. And I think we are committed to, no matter how successful or unsuccessful we are, to be authentic the whole time. So I think that started with our conversation that we had a couple years ago, and I'm happy that it's continuing. And I'm happy that you've had the whole journey on air, because people got to see your growth and your journey. And sometimes that's hard, because then it's like embarrassing to go back and say, like, wow, I can't believe I said that, and now I feel so much differently. That's like, the part that sucks, which is why you don't listen to old episodes.
No, on purpose.
Ever.
Yeah.
Record and done.
Yeah. Just pretend like it didn't happen. That's the healthiest attitude.
All right. So cool. Richard, do you want to wrap up? I hijacked you.
Yeah. No, that was beautiful. I don't think I can add too much to that, other than I'm just super grateful for our listeners too. I'm grateful that people have tuned in for this journey, and that it's benefited people, and that we have created resources that were not available to us 3-4 years ago. And that collective knowledge, it's just like we took everything that we learned from Dentaltown and have tried to build upon that, and all the experiences of our guests, and now our clients, our mastermind members. We get to pool this collective knowledge and experience and iterative knowledge back and forth between us, and create what we didn't have for the next generation of dentists who are trying to do this. And it's just so funny to me when you encounter people who like aren't even like, this isn't on their radar, and we're like, man, so much is available, but you can't make them listen. You can't make them come along for the journey. But I'm so grateful for our audience who has come along for that journey, and their patience with our pivots. And I encourage them to do the same thing, to exactly what you said.
If you're in the same situation exactly that you were 5 years ago, you probably haven't truly asked yourself the question of what do I want?
I love it. Well, we got to run, but this has been a blast as always, dude. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, man.
Thank you. Awesome. We'll talk to you guys next time on the Shared Practices podcast.